This is Hovey Smith with Hovey's Outdoor Adventures, and today I'm going to be interviewing Ron Lanzo Sr., who has a very interesting book titled Networking Works. We authors live often solitary lives, and we don't contact any more people than we usually have to. But Ron has a very, very different approach learned from decades in sales with some of America's major industries. And he gives good advice that's applicable to almost anyone, even us more die-hard introverts. Ron, you had a very successful career in sales. What provoked you to write a book on networking?
One of the reasons I was successful in my sales career was that I was properly trained in the fundamentals of selling, especially while I was employed by the Xerox Corporation. Sales is actually learned behavior. So there really isn't such a thing as a natural-born salesman, although my wife kind of thinks I am. All 16 Myers-Briggs personality types can, with proper training, learn to become successful in sales. Now, to answer your question, when I discovered networking, it opened up really a whole new way of finding prospects that I had previously learned through my cold calling methods alone.
I understand. Now, how in particular does this networking differ from the typical cold calling that you did for years with Xerox in New York City?
Well, cold call prospecting is either knocking on doors, which we did in New York City. I mean, just literally every day from 527 Madison Avenue to 575 Madison Avenue. And or approaching prospects during a blitz day via phone. You can warm these up a bit these days by doing some research on the internet or on social media sites like LinkedIn, but it's still cold calling. And by the way, that wasn't existing, it wasn't an option back then. And you remember that you're still selling. It starts out a little bit different, Javi. It starts with meeting people in a meeting place or venue, where you begin to learn about who they are, what they do, both for a living and what they enjoy for hobbies and interests. And then you progress to making a follow-up, which we tend to refer to as the one-to-one meeting with coffee later, and you begin to build a relationship. Remember, you're still not selling at this point.
Well, how did you succeed using these traditional selling techniques?
We were all pretty much go-getters. We were all pretty much all type A hustlers. So there was a lot of competition in the office and the bullpen. It was simply through hard work, being persistent in my efforts, and always being professionally persistent. One of the rules of thumb I set up was in order to achieve this type of sales success, you had to be professionally persistent. You couldn't show up and sound like a broken record. You had to return with something new. You can't give the impression you're pressing them or you're desperate to close the sale. It has to be something that benefits the customer, and it must be in their best interest if it solves the customer's or prospect's problem.
When did you actually recognize the significance of networking?
It wasn't until I returned to New York City from my stint in Maryland, and I was working in Annapolis, but I took a job in Manhattan, and I decided to join ISMO, which is the International Facility Managers Association. I had signed up and joined the New York chapter. I began to meet people who wanted to know what I did and how I could help them. As it turns out, very soon after joining, I also started attending the ISMA New York City breakfast venue that took the first Thursday every month. At that point, I met a young lady by the name of Wendy Fong, who worked at our office. And she called me up and said she had a customer who wanted to rent some furniture. After I built this relationship, we went in and spoke to the customer and did a rental furniture deal. Closed it pretty quickly. The networking light bulb went off, Javi.
Now, one thing I noticed in your book, that you had a commonly repeated theme that people buy from people they know and like. Now, it would seem to me if a person needs something, just go down to the store and get it. Can you give an example where establishing a personal relationship was particularly important and worked for a significant sale?
Well, to your point, that's a good conclusion, Hubby, because if someone really does need something, they can just go out and purchase it. They already know what they need or want, as well as the fact that they decided it solves their problems, so they're going to go make the purchase. And we're talking about a transactional-based need-demand. They go to a department store, go to Home Depot, Costco, or perhaps purchase it online through Amazon. In a business situation, however, where someone needs to hire a contractor to refurbish their office space, or they need to rent or purchase new commercial office furniture, then they're most likely not going to do this without finding someone that they know, like, and trust.
Now, one thing I noticed in your book that sort of surprised me is that you became a seller of rental office equipment. And why did you join a group that sold automobile and truck tires?
Well, I really didn't join the group. I was transitioning between positions, and I hadn't yet really got into the office furniture business. That's way back when. I turned the clock way back, Holly. And I think it was probably before I even joined Xerox. And anyhow, a friend of mine offered me this opportunity. It seemed like a lot of fun, and it was entrepreneurial. It really gave me a new perspective because I had to actually go down there physically to the warehouse, pick up these tires, drive back, and then sell them to automobile and truck dealerships. So it was really just an educational experiment more than anything else, Hubby.
Well, many of your book's chapters feature those in a great variety of businesses, telling how they use networking to their advantage. How many different types of businesses and activities did you highlight in your book?
I did highlight quite a few, but I tried to focus on some of the most successful, and I tended to move them up in the book in terms of earlier chapters. The more successful people that I highlighted in my book, people like Gary Anzalone, who really developed synchronized networking when he was president of ISPA, and now he's developed a brand new organization called IB, the International Business Developers Association. He's taking it nationally. It's going to be a big thing. Ed Sanders, on the other hand, was a consummate networker who was using Salesforce from 2 different laptops and was personally getting involved with customers to solve their problems. Adrian Miller, who started out as a marketing promoter and a person who wrote copy for salespeople, decided to turn it into a networking group, and she's been very successful. So I kind of thought that most of the people that I know how to network properly were these kinds of people. Gary focuses on quality, not quantity, tries to make 1 or 2 key contacts per meeting rather than try to collect business cards from everybody at the event.
One of the things I really personally appreciated about your book is that you did take pains to unpack some of these acronyms that are commonly floating around as names for these organizations, which usually consist of a series of letters that mean almost absolutely nothing unless you happen to be in the know. But you took the time to list those, explain them, and actually give directions on how to join many of them. Do you think that networking is universally applicable?
Yes, of course, I absolutely do. Because as I've said so many times in my book, that not only do people buy it from people they know, like, and trust, but they also are comfortable referring someone that they know, like, and trust, because they prove that they can be a reliable business relationship partner.
Now, many of the people that you highlight are officers in or started their own networking organizations in New York, but some have expanded nationwide or even internationally. Can you tell us about a few of the more prominent organizations?
Yes, most of the real estate type of organizations are very powerful groups and are key to anyone that's getting involved with selling and servicing these companies and their members. But beyond that, use a couple examples. Gary Anzalone and his International Business Development Group, he's expanded to Boston right now and has plans to roll out nationally. Anthony Kazatsis, NYC Networking Group, NYC Real Estate Group, decided to go virtual and started monthly networking sessions, and he's continuing that. He's moved his business down to South Carolina, I believe. And he has big plans to go nationally with this networking group.
Well, with so many groups out there, how does a person find an appropriate networking organization since they're all so different?
Well, as I had mentioned in several chapters of my book, Hubby, they should do some research. And today it's easier by using Google or Bing. And they should also talk with people they work with or people who are in the same industry. It's best that they find out what organizations are going to be the best fit for what they do career-wise. You know, if you're in commercial real estate, there are so many good groups. When I mentioned IFMA, the International Facility Managers Association, BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, Cornet Global, or PwC, the Professional Women in Construction. These would be ideally suited for anybody that's involved with office construction.
Should a person belong to more than one of these networking organizations?
Yes, of course. Being a member of more than one organization gives a person more of an opportunity to meet, network, and become known by more people. Sometimes two organizations offer a different perspective, but they're involved in similar popular segments or industries. This is the case with Cornet Global and IFMA.
Now, even if you don't live in a big city, what organizations are available to you?
That's a good question because in the country sometimes things can be less available. But I'd say start with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's a great place to start your networking adventure. If you're a small business, then I'd check out organizations such as Kiwanis, Rotary, even Toastmasters, which is great for developing speaking skills. And of course, BNI, Business Networking International, which is the world's largest networking organization. They have chapters everywhere, including suburbia.
Is at least some degree of networking available to everyone?
Yes, as I mentioned many times, and just mentioned recently, U.S. Chamber of Commerce is readily available in nearly all cities, states, and counties. In Manhattan, there happen to be two. There happen to be the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce and the New York City Chamber of Commerce. That's not likely to be the case in Columbus, Georgia, but you're certainly to find a chapter. It's a great place to start and learn about networking. It might not be best for everyone, but then, as I said earlier, Kiwanis and Rotary, perhaps even Mason, are similar organizations that could be quite effective, particularly for small business entrepreneurs.
Well, there is one other I would also add that is significant nationally and even has some international pull. And that is the Future Farmers of America, which operates mainly in rural America, of course. But they have very active programs in entrepreneurship. And they encourage their young members to do entrepreneurial type things. Now, usually this relates around livestock or crops or something agricultural, but not necessarily. And this is one of many smaller networking organizations that are available almost anywhere. Now, it would seem that, we're all selling something, and it might be goods, it might be services or knowledge or some combinations of these. What individual traits does a person need to develop to network successfully?
Then I'd say the ability to ask the right questions when you first engage someone at a networking event, and then being able to listen carefully so that you can see how you might be able to help them find new business and grow their network first and foremost. Remember, it's not about showing up, throwing up, and it's definitely not about selling everyone you meet. But your goal should be to meet people, find out what they do, and how you can help them find new business relationship opportunities. I feel strongly about this because what goes around comes around.
Now, among the most important points for successful networking that you mentioned are attending regularly, being a contributor, taking a real interest in helping solve others' problems, giving something of value to others. Now, what others might there be?
I think you pretty much encapsulate the entire secrets of success. But I think I'd like to caution you and refer to Chapter 33 in my book. It's by Roger Kahn. He's the founder of Champion Office Suites, and it's entitled "When Networking Goes Bad." With Roger's permission, I was able to add this chapter to my book. Love it or leave it, networking plays an essential role in your efforts, not only to develop new clients, but also to remain visible with existing ones. It takes time, persistence, and a great deal of stamina for it all to come together. But when networking works, it can be a beautiful thing. Of course, if it doesn't always work, and yes, sometimes networking goes bad. For instance, consider some of these networking characters you might meet and situations. The stalker. To meet someone at an event or meeting, and from that day forward, they're doggedly pursuing you with requests for introduction and connection. The card collector. That's someone who shows up and tries to get as many business cards as he can without helping anybody. He's just roaming the room. The taker. The situation is all too prevalent and selfish. You've known a particular networker for years, crossing paths in your business lives, and always looking for something for themselves. Then you go to call on him, and the response, radio silence. And lastly, the ball dropper. You go out of your way, you make a recommendation and a referral to him, and then he doesn't follow up with the person you referred him to. So those are the things that can go wrong, and I caution everybody to be particularly careful about that.
Yes, indeed. No one likes to be around a bore who just hangs on him like a leech of some sort or other. We are all differently gifted and afflicted. What suggestions do you have for a person who is fearful of approaching others or of speaking in public?
I think we all run into this. I mean, some of us are just naturally outgoing. I'm on the far end of the extrovert scale, but there's room for introverts. In fact, there's a chapter in my book by Susan Brooke from Alignable, and she conducts if I'm not mistaken, she conducts a weekly Zoom call entitled "Networking for Introverts." And you can be an introvert and still be successful. What I would suggest, I guess, if you are an introvert, is you look around the room, if you're shy, look around the room for someone who might be uncomfortable and begin by approaching them.
Ron, what were your objectives when you wrote this book?
And I wanted to bring a different perspective to networking. I looked at all the other books that were on the market. The most famous was the Dale Carnegie book, Making Friends and Influencing Friends, that sort of thing. There was the one that really impressed me the most was Never Eat Alone. And I got to thinking, the more I studied these books, the more research I did, what was I going to do that was different? So I decided that I would focus my book on examples, individual chapter examples of some people that I knew and met over the last 15 years who were expert consummate sales professionals and expert networkers. And I thought if I did that, I'd share networking and how it's being done by a number of different people. And I can get some of the people I used to work with over the hurdle to accept networking and give it a try.
Well, if those were your aims, do you feel like you've accomplished them in your book?
We're just in the first stages of the book promotion tour, and people like you that have been so gracious to give me this time, the real work begins after the book is published. You have to get some attention and traction. I just want to use another example of networking. I reference in my book on page 166, Sean McVay, Sean's Outdoor Adventures. He's a successful YouTuber who moved from Pennsylvania to Iowa so he could move from good deer country to better deer country. He's also enormously religious. He's a devout Catholic. I think he works at the church out there. But anyhow, Sean has published a couple different books on hunting. I think he's probably got 6 or 7 out there right now. And in his last book, I asked for permission if I could use this networking section. So on page 166, Sean says, in his most recent book, How to Hunt Deer with Proven Success, Sean mentions networking as a means for locating new hunting properties on page 70. And he says, I encourage you to network with people you know and see if they can help you find new spots. I focus on my church for this, but you can do the same thing at work or in other social settings. So my point here is to emphasize that you can network just about anywhere.
Well, indeed, it would seem so. Well, what's next for you, Ron?
You know, I'm toying with another book. I'm struggling with, do I do simply a family cookbook? Do I do a mini memoir, mini autobiography of my life and growing up as a legacy example to my children and grandchildren? Or do I go into phase 2 with the second business book? And one of my ex-boss, Mike Greenberg, he's retired in Boca Raton, Florida. He wants me to do the hunting for seniors, and I think we can tweak that. I think we can have some fun with that because hunting is hard, and as you've done in a couple of your videos recently, it gets increasingly harder as we age. And I'm trying desperately to continue to pursue my passion, which is being out in the field hunting. And it might help a lot of other people, give them an idea how they might be able to adapt and pick the right kind of hunts. And, Javi, one more quick thing, just as a recap. I do plan on doing a similar TV Zoom version with Bruce Hurwitz, and he's a New York career consultant that I've known for about 15 years now. He's going to put me on his YouTube channel. I'm also going to be talking to Gary Anzalone about speaking engagement at one of his IBD, International Business Development presentation groups, one of his networking sessions. And we just keep plugging away, one speaker event at a time, maybe have a couple book signings.
Ron, your book is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and Author House, and also from your local bookstore. Well, all that sounds good. Well, thanks very much, Ron. It's been a very delightful interview.
Javi, thank you very much again for taking this time to do this interview. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.